If anyone kept a tally of how many American prisoners escaped from New York, it has long since disappeared. There were more than a few, however, and unlike Elias Cornelius, many seem to have encountered little or no difficulty getting away. In 1777, two Jersey men, James Sherman and George Thompson, broke through the fence around the sugar house after sedating the guard with a mixture of liquor and opium. The two easily located a small fishing boat and rowed across the Hudson to rejoin the American army, then camped at Morristown, New Jersey. Admanther Blodgett made his break from the sugar house by borrowing a sailor's uniform, scaling the fence, and sauntering up Broadway carelessly as if he was in the midst of friends instead of enemies. Evidently, he kept right on going without incident, all the way up to the northern end of Manhattan, where he swam across a creek to freedom. When Lieutenant David Marinus was allowed out of the sugar house to buy food, he knocked down his guard and just walked away. Escaping the prison ships in New York was harder, but not impossible. Thomas Bell escaped from the Whitby in January of 1777 by somehow getting permission to go ashore and then disappearing. A day or so later, he surfaced in Philadelphia and gave the Executive Committee of Congress a thorough report on the number and disposition of enemy forces in New York. Captain Jean Tennant, a prisoner of the Prince of Wales, simply jumped overboard and swam to safety. One night in December 1777, Major John Jack Stewart, or Steward, and several other American officers fled a prison ship moored in the Hudson by quietly lowering themselves onto a boat tied alongside, then rowing over to New Jersey before the sentries realized they were missing. 13-year-old Christopher Hawkins, released from one of the prison ships to serve as a waiter on the frigate Maidstone, was sent ashore one day in 1778 to pick up an officer's laundry. He and a couple other boys hitched a ride over to Brooklyn with a local dairyman. Then he walked 100 or so miles out to Sag Harbor in high spirits. Friends there put him on a sloop bound for New England, and soon he reached his home in Providence, much to the joy of my parents, and not a little to myself. Once or twice, on their trek across Long Island, the boys had been stopped for questioning, but according to Hawkins, they were never in any real danger. The experience of Thomas Painter, on the other hand, serves as a reminder that escape attempts always involved a certain amount of risk. Painter had seen action at Brooklyn, Harlem Heights, and White Plains, then lost interest in soldiering and decided to try his hand at privateering. It did not go well. In the summer of 1778, now 18, he was captured off Oyster Bay in a whaleboat named True Blue. After 2 weeks as prisoners on the Good Hope, then anchored in the Hudson near the Paulus Hook ferry landing, he and his captain, Elderkin, jumped overboard in the middle of the night and began swimming for their lives. Elderkin made it to the Manhattan shore, only to be recaptured and returned to the Good Hope several days later. Painter had better luck. Taking advantage of the flood tide, he swam north and came ashore, almost naked, somewhat above King's College, near the foot of present-day Chambers Street. He wandered around the outskirts of town for a few days, hungry and thirsty, sleeping under bushes and haystacks and hiding from enemy soldiers, who seemed to be everywhere. One night, in desperation, he resolved to swim across the Hudson to New Jersey. It took him until 3 o'clock in the morning, but he made it safely and set out for West Haven, Connecticut, my native village. Except for a ferry ride back across the Hudson at Stony Point, he walked the entire distance, depending on the kindness of strangers for food, clothing, and pocket money. Along the way, he figured out that privateering was nothing better than highway robbery and decided to join the militia again. Some attempted escapes failed completely. Thomas Stone jumped a sugar house fence in the spring of 1778 and got all the way up to Harlem River in Upper Manhattan before soldiers caught up with him. When they brought him back to the sugar house with bayonets at my back, Sergeant Wally gave Stone a caning and sent him to the provost dungeon for a few days with not a blanket, not a board, not a straw to rest on. An experience he never forgot or forgave. I thought if ever mortals could be justified in praying for the destruction of his enemies, he would later admit, I am the man. Frederick Nagel was among half a dozen Pennsylvania soldiers captured at Fort Washington, who were inexplicably taken off one of the New York prison ships, and sent up to Halifax, Nova Scotia. After an abortive escape attempt there, they were locked up for 6 months on half rations. One of the group received 800 lashes, virtually a death sentence. The flesh fell off his back, Nagel recalled.